But in working with those girls, it really taught me about trauma and like really forced me to deal with some of the things that I needed to deal with. You know, you start talking about, you know, people's childhood and things like that. It forces you to take a look at your own stuff, right? And things that you may not have deemed as dysfunctional, but then you really realize like, well, yeah, that was kind of on the line. And so those years of working as a counselor, I got a chance to see parts of Tallahassee I'd never seen before.
From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors, all the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore. And in this episode, I speak with Lashawn Gordon, Executive Director of United Partners for Human Services. Lashawn grew up in Pensacola as a big sister to 4 boys, with lots of responsibility, but also support from extended family and a caring community. She saw that education and work could also lead to other opportunities, which she took full advantage of. She came to Tallahassee to finish her undergraduate education at Florida A&M University and got connected to the PACE Center for Girls, where she would serve the young women in our community for 16 years. Lashawn has the heart of a counselor and mentor, with the vision for leading an organization and finding innovative solutions to serve our local human service agencies and those who depend on them. We started our conversation talking about growing up in Pensacola.
So I had a very unique childhood. I am an old soul in a lot of ways. I have a very mothering spirit. So it's ironic. My parents were young when they had me, but I had a lot of older women in the neighborhood that just kind of, you know, saw things in me. So I was the kid who was 7 years old reading the Bible from front to back because, you know, Miss Venus was having a Bible study or Miss Johnson next door was having a group in the yard. When I was in elementary school, I was what they call gifted. Not as smart as I used to be. I always tell people that, like, what happened?
You peaked too early.
Right. But I got a lot of opportunities. So got a chance to participate in things on college campuses and go on trips. And that just kind of spilled over into middle school. And growing up in a community where there wasn't a lot of money, those things gave me the gift of exposure. So it kind of shaped my life. It shaped my worldview. So I got exposed to things that many of the kids in the neighborhood didn't get exposed to. But one of the things that I knew very early on was that I needed to make it out of the neighborhood. And the way to do that was education, service. So I spent a lot of my times and my weekends doing stuff in the community, you know, Red Cross, Saturday Scholars. At one point, I did a kind of like a summer internship where we captured the stories of World War II veterans.
Oh, wow.
And so things like that just began to open my mind to bigger and better things. And then I've always been a reader. My grandmother used to say, reading will take you places. Mm-hmm. And so I'd read these books and you know, see these things and hear these things. And so my childhood was rich in that I grew up with my grandparents, but also grew up with my great-grandmother. Mm-hmm. And so hearing those stories, you know, seeing the sacrifices that she made so my generation could go on to do some things, it was a very unique experience.
Yeah. So talk about, what did you see about your neighborhood? It sounds like it was kind of a village situation, right? Like you had other older women in your life, you had family in your life, and that part was good, right? But what was it about your community or your neighborhood that you felt like you needed to get out of that to do what you wanted to in your life?
Yeah, so, you know, I think when you grow up in a neighborhood where there's poverty and there's, you know, violence, or you can go 2 streets over and, you know, somebody may be selling drugs or doing drugs, I was savvy enough at a young age to realize that was dysfunction. And so for me, the goal was always, okay, let's get past the dysfunction. My grandparents played a big role because they lived on the other side of town. And so, you know, weekends were, hey, grandparents are going to come pick you up. You're going to go to church.
You mean a more affluent side of town?
Okay. We're going to pick you up. You're going to go to church. So, again, it was, okay, I'm going to leave this area and go to a space that's very different. This difference is where I want to be.
Okay.
I want to be on the different side
You
of
saw
town.
another way of life.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So talk about your parents and your siblings. What was your immediate family life like?
Yeah, so like I said, my parents were young when they had me. I'm the oldest of 5. And so I think that comes from that's my mothering spirit, right? Because my youngest brother and I were almost 15 years apart. And so there's a wide age difference. It was funny because my parents were young, but they were creative. And so, on Fridays, it may not have been a sit-down restaurant, but my dad made an effort. We are going to eat out, right? So it may have been a 99-cent Whopper when they were on sale, or chicken or something like that, but they were creative. I watched my parents grow together because even though they were young parents, they're still together 40 some odd years later. And so it was interesting watching them navigate challenges. There were definitely challenges, but they were determined to stay together. We always lived in a house. So, we've never lived in public housing or anything like that. We've always had a house. We've always had a yard. And so even during the crazy and the hard times, they were committed to making sure that we had safety of both parents being together and living in a home.
Right. But you felt some of that mothering responsibility being the oldest?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think culturally in our community, the oldest, takes on a lot of responsibility.
Sure.
When their younger siblings and parents are working. And so, when I was 10, I could care for kids real well. I'm actually a really great cook because I learned how to cook at a very young age. My younger siblings, you're like our second mother because there's a huge, difference in age. And so absolutely. And then, that kind of just turned into mothering other people in the community as well. And so as the older sibling and the only girl.
Oh, they were all boys.
They're all boys.
Oh, no.
And so, yeah.
That adds to it for sure.
Yeah. So you definitely take on that role.
Yeah. Did you like school?
So school was like an oasis for me in a lot of ways because, excelling in school allowed me to do extra things, right? So it allowed me to work in the library or be in plays. And by the time I got to middle school, I went to a magnet school where, I had a laptop in 6th grade.
Wow.
Which was unheard of for most schools, but because of the type of school. So I was using internet a long time ago, dial up, CD-ROMs, but
AOL discs,
all of that.
Yeah.
But school was everything for me. It was the place where I excelled. It was where people, saw me. Because of that, I participated in a lot of things. I started going on college tours when I was in middle school. Wow. And I also, got a good sense of culture and who I am because we would have these streams, these workshops that we would do every week. And one of them was attached to civil rights in the Harlem Renaissance. So I got a chance to be in plays. I'd visited 7 or 8 HBCUs by the time I graduated from middle school. And so
there are a number of them with not too far from that area, right?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of the ones in Alabama and Georgia, absolutely. And, one of the unique things about my middle school was it wasn't very diverse. So going to middle school where there's only a handful of Black people.
Because there was the magnet school?
Yes.
Okay.
You learn how to grow in confidence. I perfected my public speaking skills. And in a lot of ways, it taught me how to be a chameleon because you adapt to certain situations, which growing up in a neighborhood where everybody was Black and then going to a school where there's only a few Black kids, it definitely taught me a lot.
I'd like to dive into that a teeny bit.
Yeah.
So what did that impact your confidence, of your feeling of belonging? Did you feel like you had to work to become accepted, or what was your mindset, or were you confident enough to say, this is who I am, I'm good? Or, as a young kid, that's hard. So how did you approach that?
So I think initially there was a lot of comparison because a lot of the kids were very well to do. I mean, these were kids getting dropped off in Porsches and Nissan sports cars and stuff.
Yeah.
But it also taught me like these are kids just like me, and so when you start visiting people at their homes and, going to slumber parties or skating parties and you're like, oh, we're all kind of, the same. And so, again, it was that exposure, right? So like, oh, didn't know people just rent out the whole skating rink for their birthday parties. and we did a lot of group work. So it really taught me a lot about other people. There were instances where, I was called an Oreo, you black, on the outside, but you acting like a white girl. Mm-hmm. There was some of that going on.
How did that make you feel?
So I am much more calm in my older years. In my younger years, I did have a comeback for everything.
Yeah.
But, things like that, they get under your skin when you're 11 and 12 years old. But by the time we got to 8th grade, it was just kind of like, whatever. Like, this is a good school. I'm not leaving. So you can call me what you want to call me. Yeah.
So you graduated in Pensacola from high school, right? Mm-hmm. So what were your plans after that? What did you want to do after you graduated?
So my plans were to graduate, go straight to college. It was interesting because I wanted to be a lawyer, and I visited all types of colleges. My senior year of high school, I got on a bus and was gone for 10 days, and we went all the way up to D.C. and came back down. And I was, wanting to go to Howard, Tuskegee, a lot of private colleges. And, my grandmother, who was just very instrumental in my life, she said, you can go, but you're going to be in debt for a long time. And I was like, oh, that's wisdom. And I was at school one day because I, one of those kids by senior year, I was leaving school at like 10 o'clock in the morning because I was done. And a small HBCU came to visit. Concordia College is in Selma. And said, hey, you want to come? We'll give you a full ride. And, I was like, yep. I don't have to do a whole lot. I know I want to, move away. I want to get out the city. And so I ended up going there and lived in Selma for 2 years. Okay. And I was like, wow, I didn't know a town could be so small, But that was a great experience for me because when the president and the provost and the dean and all of those people, all the inner workings of a college and how things work, and met a lot of great people being in that small city, didn't have to worry about all the big college pressure and all of that, and then graduated with no debt, and so that was a really, really good thing for me. One of the unique things about a lot of the smaller colleges in Alabama is when you leave for Thanksgiving break, you're done. So I'd pack up, go home, work, be able like, hey, hire me because I can actually work for like 6 weeks, and, got a chance to come home and work. And so, yeah.
So it was a 2-year college?
They had some 4-year programs, but they had business and education, but I chose to do the 2-year track. Came home that summer, decided I wanted to go to FAM. I applied to FAM, and so was home that summer and came to FAM in 2000, and the rest was history. Tallahassee became home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as HBCUs go, FAMU is...
everything
that was the big goal, right? Probably.
Yeah, that was it. My best friend came straight to FAMU, so it was like, all right, I'm coming. Right. Yeah.
Was it everything you thought it would be?
So FAMU was a very unique experience for me because I came as a junior and I lived off campus, and
that's
so
different.
That's very different. So a lot of the things that people got to do, freshman, sophomore year, just being on campus, I rode the bus into school, went to class, rode the bus back home. Mm-hmm. So, there were some people I met, but I didn't get a chance to just do everything that a lot of people got a chance to do. So, it was a great experience, but I think if I had come, initially, then I would have got a chance to, party or experience different things.
Super different. In those first 2 years, too. I mean, the second 2 years, you're taking care of business.
You're in your major.
You're in there. It's a lot of work. You're thinking about, you can still have fun, but those first 2 years, not as hard academically, and more room and time to meet people and do all that stuff.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
you got to do that somewhere else,
right?
Just not there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
No, I get that.
Because the first 2 years, I lived my best life.
All right. So your degree was in psychology, right? And your first job was in human services, right?
Yes.
At the Good News Foster Home.
Yes.
Right. So was that the kind of job you were looking for out of college, or how did that happen?
So let me tell you that story. So that's a very unique story, and Good News will always be near and dear to me. So I actually got pregnant with my son while I was in college, and I went home to have him, went to Pensacola, came back, and was sitting in class one day with the person, and I had one semester I had to come back and finish, and she's like, yeah, I work at this foster home, and we're hiring, and we're looking for people. And at the time, I'd been working in sales, telemarketing sales. I was a supervisor. I was doing pretty good, but with a newborn, you can't really, you got to kind of know what you're working, right? And so, because Wayne and I would rotate, you go to class in the morning, I go in the evening, like, we got to figure this thing out. And so she told me about it. And so I remember going for the interview, I'm motherly. And I was like, I could definitely work at a foster home. And started working there. There were 6 girls. I was 22, driving a little minivan, taking girls to doctor's appointments, going up to the school when they got in trouble or things came up. And then after being there for a couple months, the supervisor left. And I was young, but I'd worked supervisory positions. And so I'm like, I want this job. And they said, you are way too young. And I said, well, y'all haven't hired anybody. I've been doing the job. So what we doing? And I'll never forget it. They went to DCF and got a waiver because I was so young so that I could be the supervisor of the group home.
Yeah.
And so I worked there, and the youngest was 11 all the way up to 18. And so I remember that very first Christmas, we didn't go home. We stayed in Tallahassee so that we could do Christmas for the girls, Thanksgiving for the girls. Fast forward, I started enrolling the girls in PACE for girls, so that they could get wraparound services. And went in PACE one day, and somebody was like, we're hiring. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. Because I was, I'd come in the morning, I had a staff, but you're always on call at a group home as the supervisor.
Sure, yeah.
And so I eventually applied one day as a counselor, and then worked at PACE for almost 16 years. And so stayed at Good News, because I still kind of stayed behind the scenes, even when I transitioned, because when you're working with children and you're serving as parental figures, because my husband had also started working at the boys' house.
Okay.
You don't just say, I'm out. You got to kind of do a little transition plan. But enrolled the girls at PACE and started working there and spent the bulk of my career at PACE.
So before we get to PACE, was it your plan to stay in Tallahassee? Is that where you guys wanted to start your family?
So it was interesting because our son, that's his thing now. I don't want to be a local forever. Like, I need to move because I grew up here. We came here, and a lot of people from Pensacola was here. We met a lot of cool people. I don't think we thought we would stay 25 years later. But once we got here and kind of got the village and the connection of people, and I always tell people Tallahassee is kind of like a little big city. There are things to do. And so once we got here, it was like, yep, this is home.
Yeah.
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 Tallahassee does that to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. My wife and I met at school and never left.
Yeah.
So we've been here our whole adult lives.
Yeah. Most people.
Yeah.
And then you look and you say, oh, well, we lived here longer than we lived at home. So it's kind of like your home.
For sure. All right. So you talked about transitioning to PACE, and you started as that counselor. So talk about, what the PACE Center for Girls is and what your job was there when you first started. And you moved your way up to a program director, right, at some point. Yeah. But let's just talk about your experience at PACE and what impact that had on you.
Yeah, so when I got to PACE, I was barely old enough to be on the insurance. I was super young. And it's funny now because I'm 45 and my oldest girl is 39. So I was only a few years older than a lot of them, especially the ones that were in their senior year. So I got to PACE, started working as a counselor, which that experience really just helped me grow as a professional. I always tell people, the staff at the time, it's like when people see things in you, they're really going to hold you accountable. And so, it was like, hey, get your documentation done. You need to do your home visits. But it also taught me like agency culture, because JBN was young. I did have a young child. So it was also like, hey, if your kid is sick, do what you need to do. Like, you can't be here and completely focused if you got a sick kid at home. But in working with those girls, it really taught me about trauma and like really forced me to deal with some of the things that I needed to deal with. You start talking about, people's childhood and things like that. It forces you to take a look at your own stuff, right? And things that you may not have deemed as dysfunctional, but then you really realize like, that was kind of on the line. And so those years of working as a counselor, I got a chance to see parts of Tallahassee I'd never seen before. I got a chance to sit with parents who, weren't that much older than me and say, girl, like, I get it. This is hard, but we need to figure out how to keep this family together. And so I immediately started learning this community. Like, I could probably take you on any kind of shortcut because I learned how to go out and find girls, how to get girls to school, how to support girls. And I would do this thing with the girls. I'd take them in these stores like Dillard's and places like that. And we do things where people are like, that's so weird, but it was a method to the madness. And we'd like feel very expensive sheets or pillows. And I'd say, what do you think about that? It's super soft, right? Like, you can have this. But it was like that reminder of the gift of exposure.
Right.
And so being a counselor was everything.
So talk about, what does PACE do for those who don't know?
So PACE is a wraparound program for girls in middle and high school. And the unique thing about PACE is it's a school, but it's also a social service agency. So girls go to school there. Most of the girls have 5 to 7 risk factors, a wide range of risk factors, but they also get counseling there. So every girl is assigned to a counselor. They have their own individualized case plan. So, traditionally you go to school, you do your work. At PACE, you go to school and you do your work, but your counselor meets with you twice a month. And anytime in between if you need it. And then part of that also is home visits, meeting with parents, because you can't take kids and do all these things to make them whole and healthy and not focus on the family.
Sure.
And so part of that is incorporating the parents or the grandparents or the aunties or the uncles, because sometimes in unique situations, it's not always the parents raising the child, but making sure that they're very much so a part of the girl's individualized care plan.
Right. So what was it about working there that made you want to stay there for so long and work your way up and that to be such a big part of your life?
So I always say it's hard work, and it really is a magical place. And I think for me, when girls would come in and they would do that intake and they're just hopeless. And sometimes you answer that phone and you got a mama on the phone and she like, I don't know what to do. And it's that thing in me that used to always rise up, like, we gonna figure this out. And so girls come in and you see them in one place, and then by the time they get ready to complete the program, they're confident. They're doing tours. They're going out in the community. They're meeting people. I probably was, I tell people, I probably was a grandma at like 26, because I remember my first PACE girl who had a baby. Like, I'm at the hospital, like, wait a minute, Miss Gordon is here. I'm here to help. But then like, hey, yeah, and all this is good. But guess what? We got to get that baby in daycare, and I need to see you back at school in 6 weeks. So you become a huge part of helping girls find hope, helping girls be successful. I've had girls that have went on to become attorneys. And so the magic is, oh my gosh, you get a chance to be a part of that. And then for me, starting so young, I did get a chance to move up, and be promoted. I did a lot of traveling for PACE, training leaders and doing all type of stuff. It's where I found my advocacy voice, because people don't know PACE does a lot of advocacy across the state and even on a national level for girls. And so
advocacy, you mean legislative? Okay.
Yep. For policy, as well as ensuring that funding is where it need to be for gender responsive programs. So I got a chance to tap into that as well. So I always tell people, when an agency is cultivating a professional, people are more likely to stay. Because you're growing. There's a guiding principle that says embrace growth and change. And so when you can embrace growth and change with the agency, then that was huge for me. You're investing in me just like I'm investing in the girls.
Yeah, that's great. And we'll be right back. How I Got Here is sponsored by Barano Heating and Air Conditioning in Tallahassee. I've been friends with Patrick Barano since we met in a chamber leads group about 15 years ago. I'll admit that I pursued him pretty hard to be his marketing firm and eventually won him over. And the reason I wanted to work with him is that I was already a customer and I knew what kind of company he and his father before him had built. He cares about his customers, he cares about his team, and he cares about this community. I've experienced Barano Heating and Air when they installed a complete system replacement a few years ago, and I enjoy peace of mind and same-day service with my Total Comfort Service Agreement. I've also been behind the scenes at their office and seen firsthand the true character of this company. And that's why we're so proud to represent them. To learn more or to schedule an appointment online anytime, visit baranoac.com. They really always will be there for you. And now back to the show. All right, so you were there, like you said, 16 years?
Almost 16 years.
Okay.
Yep.
But you did make a move to UPHS, United Partners for Human Services.
Yes.
Where you are now the executive director.
Yes.
But there's a story before that, obviously, about you didn't walk into that role.
Right.
So just want to talk about why you made the move there and what your kind of the early part of your career at UPHS, what was that like?
Yeah, so I always tell people coming to UPHS was a God-ordained season. When I said it's time to lead PACE, I had kind of wrestled with it, and I could have stayed forever. And a succession plan was in place, but at that time, I was very comfortable leading from the second chair, and that's what I wanted to do. But I did. I decided to, leave PACE, and I'd been working with Amber, the previous ED, on a couple projects. Leadership Tallahassee, we'd done some things together. And when she said, we're getting ready to hire for another position, I was like, ooh, you need this, you need that. And it was kind of like we were writing the job description. And at the time, Kathleen Rogers was still the assistant superintendent, one of the assistant superintendents for Leon County Schools. And I had, reached out to her. I had an interview scheduled and all of that type of stuff. And then Amber called and said, hey, what do you think about this position that we just kind of worked on a job description together for? And I was like, okay. And so I talked to my husband and he said, well, if you're going to go work at the school district, honey, you're going right back into the same thing because you're going to work at intervention services. You're going to be every kid. You're going to feel like you got to just
your responsibility.
All in. So he was like, I just want to caution you. And so I did. I took the job at UPHS and I was the second employee because it's historically it had always been just one employee.
Okay.
And my first job was the director of membership and engagement. And a big part of that was building membership. And I remember, I'd worked at a school almost 16 years, a lot of crisis, a lot of movement. And the first week I was like, I don't know about this because it was so quiet. It was the first time that I stepped out of in a very long time where I wasn't the maypole, right at the center of most things. And so I was like, okay, yeah, this is different. Nobody paging for Miss Gordon. Nobody looking for Miss Gordon. And I got there and
that felt weird, right?
Very weird. Very weird, because again, my office was right at the front of the center. And so I was like, okay, nobody, it's quiet in here. And then also it was, part of work was community, part of work was office. So again, I'm used to being in the office most days with a meeting, but like you are in the office working with the girls and the staff all day. And so, it took me a little while to settle in and learn how to work differently. But when I got it, I got it. And so, we almost doubled the membership within a short period of time. We built all kind of programming. I started October the 1st, and then that March came COVID. So we learned how to pivot. So, I remember like, hey, we got to get Zoom. And we were both like, Zoom? Oh, and so, we started doing online workshops. We hosted our annual conference virtually for a couple years. And so it really taught us how to engage with people virtually and still support them in all of the things. And so it was the first couple years were really fun because we were building out a model where it was historically one person. Now it's two people, and now we're getting ready to bring on another person. So it's been a good 6 years.
Yeah. All right. So again, for people who don't live in this world, what is UPHS?
So UPHS is a membership coalition. So we have about 200 entities that we represent. Majority of them are human service nonprofit agencies, but we also have what we call supportive members. So those are your businesses, that's your sheriff's office, that's your school district, those are your banks. Those are people who are really, really committed to supporting the nonprofit human service sector. And so what we do is capacity building, a lot of technical assistance, making sure nonprofits and human service agencies have sustainability. Because one of the things that we know, people start stuff from the heart, right? I want to make a difference. I want to help people. But you don't want to just start stuff. You want to be able to sustain it. So we do a lot of that, a lot of supporting people that are funded by the city, the county, and the Children's Services Council. And then also we provide a lot of opportunities for networking. Our thing is the power of the collective. And so the goal is to get people out of silos. A lot of times people need stuff and they don't even know who's doing the work because they don't interact with each other. And so we do a plethora of nonprofit networking opportunities, as well as what we call member socials. And those are things where it's not an agenda. It's just you need to come and meet somebody, get somebody's business card, get somebody's information. So it's a busy work.
Yeah. All right. So recently, Executive Director Amber Tynan moved on to a new opportunity, and there was a search for a new executive director. Did you immediately know that you wanted to be considered for that, or what was going on in your head when that opportunity presented itself?
So when we kind of start talking about transition, one of the conversations that me and my husband had, who's also my best friend, is that my next move would be an executive director role. So you've been in the second seat long enough, so the next thing you do, even if it's not with UPHS, it needs to be executive leadership. And so when we knew Amber was leaving, of course we did an interim succession plan and all of that stuff, like any great agency would.
Sure.
But I definitely knew I wanted to apply for the position. I had some goals, some things that I wanted to accomplish. I'm one of those people that are real big on legacy. And so, for the rest of my time at UPHS, this is what I would like to see my legacy be. And so most definitely knew that I was going to be applying.
What was that process like? Did you know you were going to get it the whole time, or was there really a period where you weren't sure what was going to happen?
So it was definitely a period where I wasn't sure what was going to happen. So, I have a lot of...
Because it's a board that makes those decisions, right?
Yeah, a lot of relationships with people. And people were very supportive and like, girl, you got this. I really think it's yours. But there's always that, well, what if it's not? And so there was definitely a period as the board was going through the process.
And you were the interim director during this time.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so, they were very professional in that, we're not going to get into a whole lot of conversation about who's applying and what's going on. Like, we're going to go through this process. And so, those are always the moments where, for me, I just kind of really dig in and focus on the work. Because if you start focusing on the other stuff, the heart of the matter, it's very easy to drop it. And so those 60 days of going through that process.
So what was it like being the interim? I mean, you were running the agency. It was you were putting your stamp on it because you were in charge.
Yeah.
What was that time like?
So credit to Amber, there was a lot, like I said, a lot of succession planning because her goal was, regardless who was in the seat or who was coming in, to have policies, processes, and SOPs in place. And so it was good for me because, again, we built the agency out together, but I also got a chance to then start seeing all the administrative side of stuff. So, really looking at contracts and, monthly, these are the responsibilities that the ED have to do. So it exposed me to that stuff. I am a pretty fast learner. So, after a couple months, it becomes remote. Like, okay, the first of every month, right, I need to make sure this is this. Like, I got this thing figured out. I can do payroll from my phone. You know what I mean?
I like that. I can do that too.
Yeah. So, after a couple months, it becomes remote. And then part of that also, in the interim process, you don't want to start making too many changes because, in your mind, you're still the interim. You know what I mean? And so, but, with that, I was like, all right, put my stamp on a couple things.
Want to step back a little bit and ask you a broader question.
Yeah.
About human services in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
Do we do a good job of taking care of each other in this town?
So that is a great question. So I think, one, there's still a lot of silos. And so I think we have to interrupt that. I think, for the most part, the sector works and plays well together. But I think we're still interrupting years of feeling like there's not enough to go around. So, my pie is my pie, and really getting people to collaborate together a whole lot more. We talk a lot about, it's really not a competition because you're never going to run out of people to serve. Never, ever, 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 ever. It is always going to be someone to serve. And so I think that's the big thing. I think we're making a lot of strides, and people are, and, the sector's changing because a lot of people are retiring. There's a lot of new leadership. And so a lot of people don't have a lot of the history. What they have is the last few years, the here and the now. So I think people are much more collaborative and willing to work together. If I had a magic wand, there would be another pot of money out there that took care of the workers, because I think that's a big thing in human services. Agencies are doing a lot better in terms of pay and benefits, but for some agencies, they just can't. And so my pot of money would be to support the people who support the people every day.
Yeah. Because even if money is being funneled to the people in need,
client services,
right? You still got to have, those people have to live who are providing those services.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what you never want is for the people who are providing the services to just be a little bit above the people that they're providing the services to. They both shouldn't be able to qualify for assistance.
Yeah, that's a problem, I would think. Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit here, it's your job to serve the community, kind of, but you also been involved in a lot of other activities like Leadership Tallahassee, Junior League. You're still on the board with the Palmer Monroe Teen Center, right?
Yes.
So why are keeping those relationships and those involvements important to you when, it'd be easy, you're the focus of
when I do it all day long.
You do it all day long, but why is it still important to you to be involved in those other ways?
So, service is my thing, and I think it's important to work with other entities to give back. One of my very first service experiences was Zonta, and it was a lot of, mature professional women, and I was a baby, but they taught me how to serve with other people. Mm-hmm. And so for me, there's still this thing that I get excited about when you're collectively serving people. And so that is what keeps me connected to groups. I don't do as much board service as I used to because I'm often sitting with funders and entities that are supporting the agencies, but I'm also, training boards and working with boards because a high-functioning agency has a high-functioning board. And groups like the Junior League, I always laugh because I grew up, that was a very privileged group that wasn't very diverse.
Right.
And when I became a member in Tallahassee, one of the things that I'm very good at is pushing the envelope and challenging people. And so I was just over there a couple weeks ago doing a training for them because I still want you all to think about the perception and how the community see you. And so working with all of those groups, it fills my cup.
All right. You've also been recognized for your work over the years with awards from the Department of Juvenile Justice, Tallahassee State College, several things from them, among others. And you're also have been named to Tallahassee Democrats' 25 Women You Need to Know list. So what does it mean to you to be acknowledged for your work in the community and people recognizing, the good work that you do?
So it means a lot. For me, I just kind of do the work, put my head down. But when people see you, it matters because people can see you. They don't have to recognize you. One of the first awards I ever got was the Oasis Center for Women and Girls Aung San Suu Kyi Award. And that's one that doesn't always get talked about, but it's one that always is going to be near and dear because for all the stuff that I've done, I still feel like in a lot of ways I go under the radar. And so sometimes I meet people and people are like, wow, where have you been? And I'm like, just out here doing the work. And so I'm very intentional about not doing a lot of self-promoting or look at me, look at me, look at me. So when people recognize me, it deeply touches me because people don't have to recognize you for the work they do. When they do it, it's always a blessing and something that I don't take for granted. And so I am very outspoken, but if you want to see me humble in my feelings, is if somebody's giving me an award because, it's all the feels, but it's also like, I don't take it for granted because you didn't have to do it.
Right. Yeah, that's nice. All right. We haven't talked much about your family. You've mentioned your husband several times.
Yeah.
So tell us about your family.
Yeah. So it's me, my husband, and a son, a recent FSU graduate. Go Noles.
Congratulations.
Graduated on last Saturday. And so, my husband's the only child. Fun fact, we have one child. So, we just kind of kept the tradition going. But my husband's my best friend. We met in college. We grew up together. Having a kid at a young age, we've had a lot of support, a lot of villagers who have stepped right in and helped and, babysat or tutored or whatever needed to be done. We're a close-knit family because it's just the three of us.
Right.
Yeah. And so, we still sit around in the living room and, watch movies and, things like that. As your kids get older, they don't want to hang out with you as much. It's like, just bring me a plate back, But definitely my world. One of the things that we always wanted to do was just be able to provide our kid with everything he needs to be successful. And, only thing you could do is give your kids the tool, but it's our responsibility as parents to set them up for success. And we feel blessed that we've been able to do that.
Yeah. When you deal with people in need all the time as your job, what does it mean to come home to a loving family that's a safe place for you? And I imagine that's pretty important.
It's super important. Working in leadership, it's not always pretty. And so being able to come home and just say, I don't have it today, because I've given everything that I had. It's important to have a supportive spouse. And when my kid was about 10, he's my child. So, his mouth can be a little, and he'd say, hard dad pace, mom. and I'm like, yes, son. Because he
just
knew.
knew.
He just knew, and he
Yeah.
was right. And so, having a supportive family is everything, and every aspect of your career, everything that you do, when you can look out there and when they can, and you can see your family, it makes a difference. And, when you are sometimes, because even now, there's a lot going on. So you're helping an agency, you're in a meeting that's very heated, and you come home and it's like, I can breathe in the safety of this home is everything.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Lashawn, looking back, what is the one thing or person that changed or altered the trajectory of your life to this point?
So it's definitely my grandma Ernestine, my dad's mom. Like I said, we were there pretty much every weekend. And my grandma's one of those people that just always seek excellence and always held me to a higher standard. So it was like I love you so much, but I'm not going to give you everything. I'm going to make you earn some things. And then I want you to seek excellence. And so, it was exposure to different foods. It was, hey, we're taking a trip. It was just a lot of fierce conversations, because she could say things in a way where you're like, but you needed to hear it. But it was also like I love you because I'm going to pay for your books in college. I'm going to make sure you got a dorm room, a nice suite, those type of things. It's the stuff that people didn't often see, but always there. And so definitely that person who was my everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did she get to see
she
you
did.
as you moved through your life?
She
for
did.
a
She
bit?
actually passed away in 2022.
Okay.
And one of her last conversations wasn't with me. It was actually with my husband. And she said, thank you. Thank you for bringing my granddaughter home to see me, but thank you for making sure that she's good. And that was kind of one of those moments that, we both will remember, and knowing that was her way of saying, I'm proud.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had that moment.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Final question. The podcast is named How I Got Here. So we've talked about how you got to this point in your life. Where do you think here might be for you in 3 to 5 years from now?
I think in 3 to 5 years, I'll still be in the community because, I'm going to always be serving. But I would love to do more leadership coaching and training of nonprofit executives. And so I'll be here maybe doing something a little different, but it will definitely be making sure that the next generation of leaders is prepared to continue to lead the charge.
Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.